Well, welcome to the program today. And with me, I have my friend who I've known for at least 12 years, whose name is Laurie Martin. And one thing that kind of deals with what we're going to talk about today is it was a few years ago, and together we did a grief counseling workshop. And that was really quite an experience. But anyway, Laurie, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself. And who is Laurie Martin?
Well, that to me sometimes is a very big question. Well, to start from the career perspective, I'm a trauma treatment specialist and a grief companion, and I also teach crisis education. And this started really from my own life experience, my life interruption way back when I was at the age of 30. So, as sometimes most of us, sometimes what happens, we sometimes don't know exactly what our career path is going to be, but something happens, either positive or not so positive, and all of a sudden we find ourselves doing something that we really have a passion for. So, helping people dealing with trauma and very difficult situations and not being in a place of analyzing or assessing them, but walking alongside them is really my passion. And then the other side of that is empowering people on how to prepare themselves when meeting a client or a person that's also going through a difficult situation. Sometimes professions do not give you those skill sets, and you find yourself wavering when you get that phone call that knocks you off your chair saying, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to say next?"
Hmm.
So I've set up programs to teach people as well as to help them through their journey to reach the goals that they want to make them feel better about themselves and joy once again. It sounds easier when you say it. It's a lot of emotional work when you're going through it, but the outcome from what my experience has been is very positive for people, and I always receive very good feedback, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to have that privilege with people.
Oh, well, thanks, Laurie, for that introduction. And you wrote a book called Life Interrupted. What's the story
Yes.
behind the book, and what motivated you to write that book?
Well, twofold. This is the book.
Hmm.
And when my life interruption started, and I don't normally say what it was publicly, but today I'm privileged that you've asked me to share my story.
Hmm.
My first relationship, I was married for a number of years, and it came out that my then husband was a pedophile. And that was devastating and shocking. So my loss wasn't a death or an illness, it was this tragedy, a heinous crime that had entered into my life. And I really didn't know what to do with it at that time. And it was shocking. And it took me a period of about 4 to 5 years to really learn direction, seek help, learn to understand myself, how to connect to people better. And and I just became really hungry to learn about trauma and started going to school and educating myself more and more, and then putting myself in the front lines, working where the raw emotion is. And from there, I just kept wanting to do more and more and learn and learn and learn. So when I wrote this book, my mother had died in 1995. And so people were asking me, "Laurie, you've gone through crisis. What can you recommend? What can we learn? What can you share?" So I wrote this book, and it's a guide of really understanding the nucleus of what loss is, because you can find yourself in a library overwhelmed with books. And so I basically took everything I possibly could that
Hmm.
I would find connects with people in a very human and very easy frontline language, and created a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it came to a title, and then it came to an image for that book.
Mm-hmm.
So where I am with that was when my brother's son, first of all, was killed at the age of 21 in a tragic car accident. I felt for my brother and his
Mm-hmm.
family, and I said, my gosh, their life is interrupted. So that
Mm-hmm.
became my aha moment. That's life interrupted. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I was writing this book, which took me quite a long time because I really wanted to make it something valuable that everybody is going to get a nugget from, to walk
Mm-hmm.
away with something that's going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I took my story to a designer, an artist,
Mm-hmm.
she said to me, what did it feel like when your world started
Mm-hmm.
crumbling down with that major life interruption? And I said, it was like a forest that had burned down and I could not see a blade of green grass anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she came back to me with an image of artwork, she had this forest, and I'm hoping you can see it.
Yeah, yeah, I can see it.
So I'm looking at this and I said, Monica, I see a pink rose. Why is there a pink rose in that forest? And she said, Laurie, come on, that's the rose of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going through trauma and you're
Mm-hmm.
going through all this emotional turmoil, you're not thinking of hope so much as surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like every morning when you get up, your feet are touching the ground, but sometimes your body isn't even connected to your feet or your mind. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy, and everyone has their own personal experience, and mine is mine. And but if people can learn with
Mm-hmm.
how I've learned and the nuggets that have been my blessings along the way to help
Mm-hmm.
others, then I feel that that's a gift. And to
Yeah,
see someone's eyes sparkle again,
yeah, yeah,
that to me is so rewarding. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned trauma, and I'm in the work that I do, like addictions. A lot of times we talk about trauma from the point of view of being traumatized when we're growing up as kids, like in the home, whether it was abuse or just being put down or criticized and all that it affects us. But it kind of sounds like trauma is something that can happen anytime, uh, and have a devastating effect. So would you say you're kind of like a person that helps people deal with trauma?
Yes. Yes. Or some type of loss,
Yeah.
because for each of us, depending where we are in our life experience, the
Mm-hmm.
magnitude of that trauma may be different for me than it will be for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I cannot ever put anyone on the same scale
Yeah.
because it varies with life experiences, relationships, how we perceive the world, how we learned as children growing up how to deal with something that's traumatic or
Mm-hmm.
with high emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that sticks with us and becomes a part of our belief system. And
Mm-hmm.
once we can hone in on that belief system and
Mm-hmm.
find out what that nugget is that really leaves us spinning longer than we need to,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the stepping stone we need to start for our own reconciliation and healing.
Yeah. Just one question that kind of comes to mind. When you're helping people in this area, do you usually deal with like individuals, like on one-on-one, or do you deal with kind of groups, or is it kind of like a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, Robert. Sometimes it's one-on-one because some people, I should say, are comfortable there, and some like group interaction because they don't feel so all alone in a group. But the important thing that I like to teach is that there's so many modalities. There's over 200 modalities that people can reach out to and find.
Hmm.
But when you first experience the unexpected, then you're spinning and you don't know really where to go. Because if it's
Yeah.
not in your field, where do you go for help?
Mhm.
Or how do you know what's right for you? And
Mhm.
oftentimes you will hear people saying, well, I met this person and I just did not connect with them,
Mhm.
or I didn't feel they got me. So
Mhm.
it's really important to ask the questions of the people you're seeking.
Mhm.
And in my circle, I have over 200 professionals that are either working in counseling, therapy, psychotherapy, or they're even in Reiki,
Mhm.
emotional healing, art therapy. There's just so many of us. But the one thing that we do agree with,
Mhm.
it's important that you're not alone and that
Mhm.
you work with someone.
Mhm.
And sometimes you might need one or two people,
Mhm.
two different people, a therapist and a coach, or
Mhm.
a group and maybe a clergy. Like it just depends on where you're at.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding is when I have people, like I created this questionnaire on what you may want to ask
Yeah.
when
Okay.
you're finding someone so that
Mhm.
they understand you.
Mhm.
If someone hasn't experienced something similar, then
Mhm.
it's hard for them to comprehend.
Mhm. Yeah.
Even though they're quite effective in their profession,
Mhm.
sometimes you want someone that has something similar to base your connection with.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
found that too when I started seeking help. It was very difficult to find a person, a professional that dealt with partners or
Mhm.
spouses of pedophilia.
Mhm.
They would work with child abuse, sexual assault, which is
Mhm.
fine, but I wanted someone specific
Mhm.
for my specific trauma. And
Mhm.
that wasn't easy to find.
Yeah.
In fact, I never really did find
Mhm.
anyone.
Yeah.
And for me, all my years of growth and learning and sharing, um, I really hone in to help those
Mm.
people who are in a similar position that I was, either married or a partner of,
Mhm.
because they have children, and those children were the ones that were abused by the partner or the spouse.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your book, when your life was interrupted, you mentioned you hit the sofa. Uh, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, when my story came out in my first place of work, it wasn't really something that management at the time was comfortable with, because I'm sure they probably thought, oh, she's going to be taking time off, and is she going to be focused and
Mhm.
resilient enough to do her job? So
Mhm.
within a couple of weeks, my job became redundant and I had to find new work. And when I was going through this, I kept this such a secret. I
Mhm.
couldn't tell anyone what was happening to me. I thought it was such a terrible thing. And I ended up getting a new job that built my whole career doing what I'm doing now, which was my gift, my blessing.
Mhm.
But I also lost that job 10 years later, and it just floored me. And I call that hitting the sofa. And I
Yeah.
swear to God, I was on that sofa for months until
Yeah.
I had people or programs or books start to move me off that sofa.
Mhm.
But for some reason, I started just kind of absorbing shows. I remember Oprah, she had a show every week on the spirit within for women, female entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah.
And I listened to her and I would see these people that really wanted a career and they stepped out and they had the courage to do that. I'm going, how did they do that? And the whole show was around that. And I faithfully watched that. In fact, that was the first time I was introduced to Oprah Winfrey. And then after that, I was given this book written by Anthony Robbins. And I'm like the giant within. So between Oprah and Anthony, this was my thing. And then there was another inspirational person, and that was Louise Hay,
Oh
because
yeah.
she
Yeah.
was a woman that just kept doing things at 40 and
Yeah.
45. And she was amazing.
Yeah.
And so that kind of started feeding my brain and
Yeah.
realizing that I had to do different things
Yeah.
myself to get off that sofa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because one of my mentors is a guy by the name of Lewis Howes, and he was a professional athlete, football player, and his goal in life was to, make the big time. And he was there, but really early. I think he was just in his 20s, and he had a career-ending injury. So I think he said he spent a year and a half on his sister's couch. And he just didn't know what he was going to do. But anyway, he's kind of become like a Tony Robbins sort of person. But he's a mentor of mine. He's helped me a lot, understanding, to dream big. you know and
Yeah,
I don't think a day goes by when I don't remember what I've learned from him, because it's become
yeah.
part of my life. So that's
That's a
interesting.
good
But it,
story.
it kind of sounds similar, that you had people that inspired you,
Yeah.
and it's part of your story. I just do you use, like, when you're dealing with people like these kind of people like Oprah and Louise Hayes, to kind of tell your story and to kind of encourage other people with other people's stories?
Yes, I do. I believe stories are really important to share with people
Yeah,
because there's a lot of validity and a lot of, oh, it's a good connection with people
yeah,
because they too have stories. And you might share a book or a show you've watched, or even on the internet, there's so much information
yeah,
that people don't really think about. And all of a sudden you mention that and they look it up and they go, oh, thank you so much for that reference. That
yeah,
was so
yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
Or they sometimes share with me as well.
yeah,
And I find that really helpful. Yeah, I
yeah,
think resources are good for people to even just check it out. If it doesn't fit, don't read it, don't even view it. But if it's feeling good and it
yeah,
feels like you're connecting, then that's a gift, I think.
yeah,
But there's one important, um, I can't say mentor, but God has always been my way for healing. Growing up in a rural community,
hmm,
my family uh, believed in God and we prayed. And honestly, if God wasn't in my life when I hit the bottom, I don't know where I'd be,
yeah,
because there's lots of stories in between that were like miracles that helped
yeah,
me in darkest times along
yeah,
that journey.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful, and I totally relate myself. And one thing that I've come to realize, I've done about 14 podcasts now, and I review them after I've done them. And I'm just really kind of amazed, because I'm just telling my story. I'm just
Yeah.
telling the real story. And so, like, I refer to God as my higher power, but
Yes.
He's so much a part of my life, and everything that's kind of happened to me. I was kind of, kind of a little bit surprised, because it's not the sort of thing I usually talk to people about,
Mhm.
but I mean, I am now, because if you listen to my podcast, I talk quite a bit about it. So that's really beautiful that you mentioned that. I know you've touched a little bit on this, but what you went through is just, I can only imagine. Like, I've been through a lot in my own life, but never what you went through, and that must have been so shocking, to have to go through that. And I think you mentioned that you tried to kind of keep it secret. You didn't want people to know that, so there's the shame involved. But
Mhm.
what was the most difficult thing? When it kind of it hit the fan, sort of thing, when your life was interrupted like that. What was the most difficult thing you had to face?
Well, I think the start of it was when my then husband told me what he was doing. And that was totally flooring it. I couldn't get my head around what he was telling me. And
Hmm,
then the next step was, where do I go? What am I
hmm,
going to do? My whole life is changing right now at this moment.
hmm,
And in my family, I just wanted to be careful who I talked to about it, because I had a very close family and I didn't want them to think, oh my gosh, like, and look at me differently, right?
hmm. Yeah.
So I leaned on my sister and then my mother. And then I told my other sister, and then I just kind of stepped it out really gradually.
Hmm,
But oh, it was so awkward because now I'm with this person every day still.
hmm.
And I have to decide how I'm going to share this small apartment I was living with at that time. There was so much, it was just overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There were times that I even had thoughts of not wanting to be here,
Yeah,
any
yeah,
longer. And those thoughts were interrupted with, it was almost like a voice that said, don't make this person take your life when
yeah,
it's not your fault.
yeah,
But that was another part you had to really work through. And
yeah.
so it just became part of my life in such a way that the learning, listening to other people,
Hmm.
them teaching me when they're in their highest emotion, what works for them, what doesn't work for them.
Hmm.
It just became this, even though I had the academic training happening, I learned so much from the people with all the emotion and the real time
Yeah,
stuff happening to them.
yeah,
Yeah, even pet loss, that's another tragedy for
yeah,
other people.
yeah,
And Robert, I shared my first loss, but the second was when my nephew was killed and my mother died of cancer. And then after that was my brother, which was his son. He was killed on a snowmobile. And then after that was my father. So it was like bang, bang, bang. And you're just so numb to all this. You wonder
yeah,
how you're ever going to
yeah,
crawl out of it. But honestly, when the human spirit has this fighting power, and
yeah,
you've got people around you that you're willing to share the truth,
yeah,
because sometimes people will come to me and share things that they think I want to hear,
yeah, yeah,
but I want them to share what's really happening for them.
yeah,
So it's it's complex, but it's really good to know that there are people out there that can help you step through all
yeah,
this.
yeah. Yeah, I really relate to what you're saying because I went through a divorce. I think it was about 7 years ago now, and even though my former wife left me, but after a while I blamed myself. You know that she left
Yeah.
me. It was all my fault. Because if I had done this or if I had done that, if I had seen, and I just was beating myself up like crazy. And I went through that where I just didn't want to be around, because I was in so much pain that I just, and I kind of thought, well, this is going to go on forever, so I don't
Mhm.
want to be here if I'm going to feel like this forever. So, I
No.
kind of relate to, what you said. But one thing you kind of touched on that I think is a big thing in the work I do as a peer support worker, and that's one thing I've learned, and is that I couldn't have recovered on my own. And it kind of sounds like you're kind of feeling that way too. That was a big part of your, you know, getting over, your life interrupted. Is that the case?
That's a fair statement, Robert.
Yeah.
I was raised that if we lived in a farmhouse and my bedroom was upstairs, and if I didn't come downstairs with a smile on my face, I had to go back up until I found one.
Oh wow.
And so, when you have troubles, you deal with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but people that I meet, they share those stories that they
Yeah.
share. Well, I don't know if I really need to be here, or my friend told me this is what I needed,
Yeah.
and so you get that uncertainty at the beginning. And I think it's just because you feel you've lost control. You've
Yeah.
lost self-control, your world, you've lost control in your home. And that is a big factor in the characteristics of a crisis. The same as
Yeah.
the first one would be sudden and unexpected.
Yeah.
But then the big part of this is this beliefs and value system that we don't realize has a major effect too, because that's where the blame comes. We're going to blame God or the
Yeah.
person or
Yeah.
whoever. And it also affects our identity, which is
Hmm.
huge,
Hmm.
which is huge.
Yeah.
And so with any crisis, there's the physical aspects of it.
Yeah.
And then there's the other part that's invisible, and that's everything you and I have experienced, and any of our viewers have experienced that was traumatic for them.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's the invisible stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, one thing you touched on, and I know it's been a big part of my life, and I'm so thankful for the people that have been in my life that helped me along the way. And sometimes when I'm telling these stories now in my presentations, I just realize I couldn't have done it alone, and these people played such a big part. And I never knew who the person was going to be, but all of a sudden they would either say something or something would
Yeah,
happen and it quite literally would change my life and I'd be on a bit better of a path. But
yeah.
I know you kind of touched on it, but who are the people that inspired you the most, you know?
Oh, there are so many, other than my prayer, which was my significant one.
Yeah.
It was friends that I could tell everything to. And
Hmm.
believe me, on my one hand, there was one person that I felt that safe to share with.
Hmm.
And then I did find a counselor that I went to 3 times, and then realizing that was a struggle, I had to lean on other people.
Hmm.
But the other side of it was education. Wanting
Hmm.
to help other people really helped me too.
Hmm.
Because, for example, I became a hospice volunteer and then a facilitator, and just learning about hospice and those people involved in hospice and what happens in that environment with families and loved ones. Just my energies just started going out
Hmm.
to those kind of interests in the community and
Hmm.
victim services and women in crisis. And
Hmm.
even though I was working, I was becoming involved in these organizations because it felt so good to learn and to grow with them. Is That's kind of a long-winded explanation, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was my searching and needing to know myself better, and people teaching me things that I could
Yeah.
either use or not use. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I totally relate to that. And there's so many people that have influenced me, and even I don't know, like books that I've read. People have said things that have just been incredible. Kind of like things that I reflect on all the time. That keep me on the path. But I think too, and I think you kind of touched on it. One of the things that I think is a big part of recovery, and some people refer to it as playing it forward. Where
Yeah.
you help other people. Because I know myself that I don't think anything makes me happier than when I'm helping somebody else and I can see them starting to smile more, you know,
Yeah.
and starting to say really positive things, And I think you kind of touched on that earlier. I think that's an important thing for you when you're working with people and you see them getting better. Is that the
Yeah.
case?
Absolutely. When they start to transition. I remember when I first stepped out as a speaker, and I remember another professional in a whole different field. He was
Yeah.
in the insurance world. He says, "How do you do that? That's so morbid and depressing." And I said, "My gosh, when you see the dull eyes sparkle again,
Yeah.
that to me is a gift. That is so meaningful and purposeful
Yeah.
that you can help give a tool or something to help someone get to that place of
Yeah.
what I call reconciliation. And semantics play a big part in people's healing
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like some people, like they use stages and phases. And I've had people say, well, I've read books on stages and phases. And when I got stuck, I felt I wasn't going to get better again. So I couldn't read that book anymore because I thought I was going to be staying in that stage and phase. So,
Yeah.
with time and education and awareness, I like to use things like, you know, um, reconciliation,
Hmm.
elements,
Hmm.
stepping stones, just words that resonate with people. And I listen to the words they use.
Hmm.
I remember my brother when his son was killed. I remember people coming up to him at the celebration of life. They also
Hmm.
called it funeral then. They would say, "Carl, I'm so sorry that your son was in a car accident, that he died.
Hmm.
And, they would give their sentiments. My brother would look at them and say, he didn't die, he was killed.
Hmm.
So I learned from that, and also working with survivors that were in other types of tragedies, listening to those key
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
was very helpful, because they look at their crisis differently than we're seeing it, because they're in
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So semantics is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
One thing I've found, a lot of my life, I've been in hiding. Like like the negative things about me, I would try and hide from other people. And I mean, why wouldn't I? Like being angry and throwing stuff around, and uh, but I find, coming out of hiding and telling these stories about kind of like what I've been through, and people seem to like me better because I think they relate, because like other people are angry too. And when I talk about like one podcast I did just a week ago or so, I talked about the time I grabbed a refrigerator and threw it across the kitchen and the thing crashed and smashed. And I mean, it was the stupidest thing, but like it was just absolute silence. Like I looked at it, my former wife looked at it, nobody said anything, and
Hmm.
and that was it. But now in my presentations, I talk about that. At first I was kind of like, I don't know, if people hear me telling that story, they might be afraid of me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like really. But I find when I tell that story, people just they like it because they relate. Because everybody, I think, has a certain amount of identity with anger. So, but I think I'm kind of feeling that from you too, like having gone through what you're kind of using, life interrupted, which was kind of, I think, probably something most people would probably never talk about, or you'd never know that about. But you've kind of almost made a bit of a career, somewhat of a career, by uh, exposing yourself and coming out of hiding and using that to help other people.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I feel it, there's an expression that I picked up over the last few years, and it was, when you come to a place that you can celebrate the
Yeah.
darkness,
Yeah.
celebrate
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
trauma, that really can put a positive spin on your moving forward
Yeah. Yeah.
more quickly. But it takes a lot to get to that place. And
Yeah.
some people stumble and they feel like they're spinning there and they don't know how to get out of that. And
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
really encourage people, if you're feeling that spin, especially after a loss and it's 5 years later, 7 years later, or more, and you feel it was like yesterday, I would really encourage someone to start exploring, just seeing what that's all about.
Yeah.
What's keeping you in that place that's
Yeah.
just like it was yesterday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And anger. Now, when I work with people with loss,
Yeah.
they will share with me that they don't get angry. I didn't get angry at the beginning either, but I threw
Yeah.
on running shoes and started to run. Like
Yeah.
I really did some physical work to
Yeah.
work through that. And actually, that was a big part of some of my well-being today. I
Hmm.
I love fitness. I decided to try something really wild and out there a few years back. I decided to go into a bodybuilding competition, did very well.
Yeah.
And now I'm all about nutrition and
Yeah.
fitness and mindfulness and how do you stay positive. And yeah, it's so our journeys are all going to be different, but exercise in some way seems to help that mind of ours deal better or embrace where we are in our moment from day to day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, you've explained a lot about uh, what you've been through and what you're doing, but I know you. I think you're classified as a trauma treatment specialist and a grief companion coach. So I think our time is coming to an end here. So maybe if you would just like to say something for our listeners that would be helpful for people that are, struggling with, you know, trauma And like, where would they start? What would your advice to be? Where would somebody start?
Big question, but not too difficult to give an answer to just help people get one foot forward. Depending where you live, if you're living in a big city, you have access to more organizations. If you're a spiritual person and you go to
Mhm.
church, you might want to go to a clergy. In a smaller community, you might not have the resources. But what I would ask you to do is talk to someone close to you. Think about who you are, what's helped you in the past when things weren't as traumatic, but still hurtful, and what you did at that time, and who was there to help you. And what did they say that helped you? What did they say that didn't help you? Um, and just kind of start exploring and asking others what they did to help them, whatever their situation or trauma was at
Mhm.
that time. So stepping out, getting the courage to be able to ask people that that you feel safe with how they made a difference in their
Mhm.
life, who did they talk to, is one step forward.
Mhm.
And even going on the internet, exploring, typing
Mhm.
in maybe your situation, how to get help, what is out there. Yeah.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's what I find myself too when people connect with me. I like to really ask the questions that are going to get to the core
Mhm.
so that we can find exactly where their struggle is.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not the situation itself, but past shadows
Mhm.
that have crept up all of a sudden with this
Mhm.
that makes it even bigger.
Yeah.
And so once we find what that is, I'm able to refer people
Mhm.
or put them through a program
Yeah.
or do a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still do one-on-ones?
Yes, I do. Now it's virtual, of course.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not the same for me because I love being with people,
Yeah.
but I'm finding that it still works and people know that my sessions, way I've set them up, it's not an hour session or a half an hour. It's whatever you need in that moment. Some
Yeah.
people call me just for a 10-minute chat and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
Laurie, I've got this question. I couldn't sleep last night. Can I just talk to you about it?
Yeah.
And they put me in their pocket and they just kind of use me as they need me.
Yeah.
But once they find out what the real core issue is that they need to deal with, it's like they just need an anchor, somebody they can
Yeah.
rely on, they know they can call
Yeah.
when needed and
Yeah.
as needed.
Yeah, I know that's so true, and there's been people in my life that have just been those rocks, those anchors, and I could just sometimes I just wanted to talk and tell how I felt, and I might say the
Yeah.
same thing over and over and over, but some people were so great they would just listen to me and they would be encouraging. But I mean, that meant so much to me. So, just by the way, your book, Life Interrupted, if people wanted to get a hold of that, uh, where would they be able to buy that book or get a hold of it?
Well, here's what I'm doing right now, Robert, with my book. I send it to people as a PDF. They can read it and send it out to whoever they want. Because for me, right now, with this pandemic that we're experiencing,
Hmm.
it's just my gift. So
Yeah.
if they want me to send them the link, it's directly to my email. There's only me. And it's my email address is info@lifeinterruptedinc.at gmail.com. So it's info@lifeinterruptedinc.com. So there's
Okay.
2 R's in interrupted.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's great. I didn't know that, but that's really nice of you to send out that book. And yeah.
Yeah, I've
Um,
worked a lot too, Robert, with nurses in the hospitals,
yeah.
and they're going through a really rough time right now
Hmm.
too. And where do
Yeah.
they go and who are they talking to? And sometimes there's just not enough resources out there, and
Yeah.
it's not always on really needing someone for
Mhm.
therapy at this moment, someone just to rely on or talk to. So thank you for even having me here today. This was a delight to be a part of your show
Yeah,
and to be able to share a little bit about me to the
yeah.
listeners that are out there. And if I can leave anything with them, just know in your heart that if you be gentle on you and do one good thing that makes you happy every day, whether that's bird watching, having a coffee, whatever that is, just embrace that and be good to you each day and treat it as each day. Because sometimes if we look at the
Mhm,
big picture, it's just too overwhelming.
mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful, Laurie, and a beautiful way to end it. And I just want to thank you for coming on the program. And it's been a delight talking to you. And if
Thank you.
anybody has trouble getting a hold of Laurie, they can contact me and I will put you in touch with her. So thanks you very much, Laurie.
Keep safe. Blessings to you and everyone. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.